Welcome to the most emotionally raw analysis in sports psychology. Today we're diving into tennis tears, why the world's toughest athletes break down in front of millions, and what their crying styles reveal about their character. From Roger Federer's graceful goodbye to Aryna Sabalenka's recent French Open meltdown just last week, we're ranking the most memorable crying moments in tennis history. Plus, we'll explore the science behind why individual sports create emotional breakdowns that team sports simply can't match.
Oh boy, where do I even start with Sabalenka's French Open disaster from last week? This woman cries during the trophy ceremony like her heart is breaking, then goes to her press conference and basically says Coco Gauff didn't deserve to win. She's sobbing about her terrible performance, then suggests Iga Swiatek would have beaten Coco instead. Like, make up your mind, are you devastated because you lost to a better player, or are you making excuses? Some players cry with dignity, others cry and then blame everyone but themselves.
What people don't realize is that tennis creates the perfect storm for emotional breakdowns. You're completely alone out there, no teammates to share the blame, no timeouts to regroup, nowhere to hide when you're falling apart. Research shows that individual sport athletes experience 40% more performance anxiety than team sport athletes. When you combine that isolation with the pressure of Grand Slam finals and millions watching, crying becomes almost inevitable. It's not weakness, it's human psychology under extreme stress.
I've been on court during some of the most emotional matches in tennis history, and I can tell you the cameras don't capture half of what's really happening. When you're losing a match you desperately need to win, your brain starts catastrophizing. Everything feels amplified. A missed shot becomes proof you're worthless. The crowd's silence becomes deafening judgment. I've seen players start crying during changeovers and never recover mentally. It's psychological warfare, but the enemy is your own mind.
You want credibility? I've covered tennis for 12 years and witnessed more emotional breakdowns than a therapist's office. I can identify different types of tennis crying from across the stadium. There's frustrated crying, devastated crying, overwhelmed crying, and what I call Sabalenka crying, where you sob like the world ended then immediately start making excuses. Trust me, when you've seen grown professionals lose it over and over, you develop a sixth sense for authentic emotion versus performance drama.
The science behind tennis tears is fascinating. When athletes cry, they're releasing stress hormones while activating recovery mechanisms. Individual sports create spotlight anxiety, millions watching you succeed or fail alone with no teammates to share blame. Research shows that athletes who cry and demonstrate resilience perform better in future matches. But athletes who cry and then externalize blame, like suggesting opponents didn't deserve to win, show poor emotional regulation patterns. Champions cry, process, and grow stronger, others cry and make excuses. Now for our top 5 ranking. Number 5. Andy Murray's 2012 Wimbledon final loss to Roger Federer. Murray carried 76 years of British tennis history on his shoulders. His voice cracking during the runner-up speech, fighting back tears while thanking the crowd, it was heartbreaking but showed incredible courage. He channeled that pain into winning the next year. Number 4. Pete Sampras at the 1995 Australian Open. Learning his coach was dying of brain cancer, Sampras broke down during a changeover but collected himself and won when Courier offered to postpone. Champions feel emotions but find ways to compete.
Murray and Sampras cried like champions, no excuses, no diminishing their opponent's achievements. Murray thanked everyone and used emotion as fuel. Sampras honored his coach by playing through grief. Compare that to players who cry during ceremonies, then immediately start suggesting their opponents got lucky or wouldn't have won against someone else. That's the difference between champions who are temporarily defeated and victims who refuse to accept reality.
Number 3. The Coco Gauff and Naomi Osaka moment from the 2019 US Open. 15-year-old Gauff was devastated after losing, crying because she felt she'd disappointed everyone. But Osaka's incredible emotional intelligence in comforting her opponent and sharing the interview made this legendary. 2 types of tears: Gauff's disappointment in herself and Osaka's empathy for someone else's pain. Both showed remarkable maturity. This is how crying can be transformative when met with compassion. It turned potential humiliation into a learning moment.
The 2019 Gauff moment was beautiful because both players cried for the right reasons. Gauff cried because she cared deeply about not disappointing people. That's champion mentality even in defeat. Osaka cried because she empathized with her opponent's pain. That's sportsmanship at its finest. Neither made excuses or suggested the other didn't deserve to be there. They cried, supported each other, and both became better champions because of it. That's emotional intelligence at the highest level.
Number 2, Roger Federer's 2009 Australian Open final loss to Rafael Nadal. After 5 sets in nearly 5 hours, Federer broke down during the trophy ceremony. He couldn't speak for several minutes, overwhelmed by giving Nadal his first Australian Open. But even in devastation, Federer was gracious. He praised Nadal, thanked the crowd, and showed that even legends cry. His vulnerability made him more human, not less heroic. That's how champions handle their deepest disappointments with class. And number 1, the Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal moment at the 2022 Laver Cup, Federer's final match. These legendary rivals, who had battled for nearly 2 decades, sitting side by side crying as Federer's career ended. When Nadal said, "An important part of my life is leaving too," he captured something transcendent: respect, friendship, the end of an era. This wasn't just crying, it was pure gratitude and mutual respect. It's the gold standard for how champions handle emotional transitions. They showed the world what true sportsmanship looks like. Now let's address the elephant in the room, Aryna Sabalenka's French Open breakdown just last week. She cried during the trophy ceremony, calling her performance terrible and apologizing for playing badly. But then in her press conference, she suggested Iga Swiatek would have beaten Coco Gauff and claimed Gauff only won because of Sabalenka's mistakes, not Gauff's great play. This represents a textbook case of emotional dysregulation. Crying showed she cared, but the excuses revealed inability to process defeat gracefully.
This is exactly what drives me crazy about Sabalenka's crying. She sobs during the ceremony like her heart is broken, then immediately starts making excuses and suggesting other players would have won against Gauff. You can't have it both ways. Either you're devastated because you lost to a better player on that day, or you think your opponent got lucky. Champions like Federer, Murray, and even young Gauff cry and then give credit where it's due. Sabalenka cries and then tries to rewrite history. That's not champion behavior.
What separates champion tears from victim tears is what happens next. I've seen players cry after devastating losses and come back stronger because they process the emotion healthily. I've also seen players cry and then spend months making excuses, blaming conditions, or diminishing their opponents. The tears aren't the problem, it's whether you use them as motivation or as justification for poor sportsmanship. Champions cry and grow, others cry and stagnate in their emotional immaturity.
My message to current and future tennis players: cry all you want, but do it with class. Learn from legends who showed that tears and grace can coexist. Don't cry during ceremonies and then immediately start diminishing your opponent's achievements. Sabalenka, if you're reading this, work on your emotional processing as much as your backhand. The tennis world respects authentic emotion, but we can see right through excuse-making disguised as disappointment. Cry like a champion, not like someone who can't handle losing to better players.
Tennis tears reveal the deepest truths about athletic psychology. They show us that even the world's best athletes are human, that pressure affects everyone, and that individual sports demand incredible emotional strength. From Federer's graceful goodbye to Gauff's teenage heartbreak to Sabalenka's recent emotional confusion, each tear tells a story about character under pressure. The champions we remember aren't those who never cried, they're those who cried with dignity, processed their emotions healthily, and grew stronger from their most vulnerable moments. The science of tennis tears is really the science of human resilience. Thanks for joining us.